The clatter of metal trays was the unofficial soundtrack of every lunch hour at Fort Bragg. It echoed off the high ceiling and bare walls, mixing with the steady hum of 100 overlapping conversations. Soldiers, hungry, exhausted, half irritated and half used with the day, lined up along the serving stations like cattle moving through a chute. The air smelled of chili mac, disinfectant, and the faint sweat of men and women who'd been in the field since dawn. Tables were pushed into long rows, forcing everyone into unspoken proximity. Conversations weren't private here. They were shared, overheard, corrected, and laughed at whether you wanted them to be or not. A pair of privates in the corner argued loudly about who screwed up the last PT drill, while another group tried to trash-talk each other between spoonfuls of powdered mashed potatoes. Some soldiers wolfed down their meals with military efficiency. Others lounged, stretching lunch into the closest thing they had to freedom that day. Every once in a while, the mess hall doors banged open, and another wave of camas poured in, boots thudding against the linoleum. At the far end of the room, Staff SGT, Alex Cross sat alone at a table, her tray neatly arranged. Mashed potatoes on the right, chili mac on the left, cornbread centered precisely like she'd measured the angles. She wasn't trying to avoid anyone. She just didn't see the point in small talk. Her posture was crisp, even off duty, shoulders pulled back, jaw set with a habitual tension that came from years of learning to stay ready. Most people didn't know her story. They saw the subdued U.S. Army patch, the airborne tab, the Spartan calm in her eyes, and assumed she was just another lifer hardened by deployments. They didn't see the things she carried quietly, the missions that didn't make it into reports, the losses that didn't show up in after-action reviews. She didn't brag, didn't bluff, didn't pick fights or rise to bait. Cross believed you could tell a lot about a soldier by what they didn't say. Across the room, Specialist Mason Shaw believed the opposite. Shaw was the type whose presence was announced before he spoke. Tall, wide-shouldered, arms bulging against his camo sleeves. He walked like he owned the building, like every corridor and every table belonged to him. He wasn't the worst soldier on base. He did just enough to avoid trouble, but he liked to test people, especially those he mistook for weak. And today, Cross looked like an easy target to him. Shaw strutted between tables, laughing with two other specialists, spinning his tray like a basketball on one hand. His friends smirked as he angled toward Cross's table, like they already knew where this was headed. With each step, his grin widened. Cross didn't see him coming, not at first. She'd lowered her gaze to her food, lost in thought. Her fingers brushed the pale crescent scar running across her forearm, a scar only a few trusted people knew the story behind. To most soldiers, it was just a mark. To her, it was a reminder, a quiet one, a razor, thin boundary between who she used to be and who she decided to become. The noise of the mess hall seemed to dull, like the world was dimming just before something happened. Then Shaw made his move. He didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. As he walked past her, he pivoted his shoulder just enough to put his full weight into its lambing into Cross with a force meant to knock her back. It worked. Cross's tray jolted from her hands, clattering off the edge of the table. Chili mac flew in an arc, splattering across the linoleum in splotches of orange and red. Mashed potatoes smeared across her uniform. The tray banged loudly as it skidded across the floor, followed by the frantic scatter of silverware. For a heartbeat, everything froze. 100 conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hung in mid-air. Boots stopped mid-step. It was as if the mess hall itself inhaled sharply and held its breath. Shaw smirked. His friends watched with the eager anticipation of schoolyard bullies waiting to see if they just lit a fuse. But Cross didn't react, not the way anyone expected. No flinch, no curse, no flash of anger. She inhaled slowly through her nose, letting the air fill her lungs the way she'd been trained to do under pressure. Then she rose, deliberate, calm, and steady, not rushed, not rattled, just controlled. As she stood, the overhead lights caught the pale scar on her forearm, making it glint like a battle-worn reminder of things these soldiers had never seen. Her eyes lifted, cold and precise. She didn't glare. She didn't snarl. She assessed, measured, calculated, a stare like a sniper lining up a target. Silent, focused, unshakable, and without a word, cross-turned and walked away. The mess hall stayed utterly still because everyone knew that wasn't weakness, that was something far more dangerous: restraint. Specialist Mason Shaw watched Staff SGT Cross walk away with the same expression a predator gives prey that doesn't run. His smirk didn't fade, not even as the silence in the mess hall thickened to the point where you could almost taste it. Soldiers who'd been laughing seconds earlier now sat stiffly, eyes darting between Shaw and the door Cross disappeared through. He didn't understand what he'd just witnessed, not the discipline, not the restraint, not the quiet fire in Cross's eyes right before she turned away. To Shaw, everything was a game. Dominance, ego, the hierarchy of who could do what to whom and get away with it. He always pushed boundaries, not out of bravery but out of boredom, and today he thought he'd found a new boundary to test. His two friends, Privates Hensley and Fortman, looked at him with a mix of thrill and uncertainty. "Bro," Fortman whispered, half laughing but half not. "You really shoulder?" checked a staff sergeant. Shaw shrugged and picked up his tray. "She's just a staff sergeant," and she walked away. "What's she gonna do? File a complaint, please?" Hensley, the smarter of the two, wasn't convinced. He looked at the spilled food on the floor, then at the door Cross had gone through. Something in her silence had unnerved him too, though he couldn't put it into words. "You sure that was smart?" he murmured. Shaw shot him a look. "Don't puss out on me. She didn't say a word. She didn't do anything. That's weakness." But Hensley knew better than to say what he was thinking. He'd seen combat on one deployment, just enough to know that the quiet ones were the ones you didn't poke. Especially the quiet NCO across the room, Staff SGT. Colin Mercer watched all of this with the calm of a man who'd been in the army long enough to see patterns before they formed. Mercer wasn't the type to jump into drama, but nothing in the army happened in a vacuum. Cross walking away wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning, and Shaw was too arrogant to see it. Mercer folded his arms and leaned back in his chair, letting his eyes rest on Shaw like he was studying a small fire that might turn into a forest blaze if left unchecked. Meanwhile, soldiers began whispering again. "What's her deal? Why didn't she snap? She took that hit like a freaking statue. Did you see her face? I'd have punched him." Some were confused, others were impressed. A few were nervous because restraint in a soldier, especially a seasoned NCO, meant they were operating at a level beyond emotion. It meant they'd learned, often painfully, when reacting made things worse. And sometimes soldiers who didn't react were the ones with the most dangerous histories. Shaw didn't notice any of this. He was too caught up in the attention. Being the center of the room made him feel powerful. He puffed his chest out, sat heavily on a bench, and dropped his tray onto the table like a man dropping a mic. But even as he tried to bask in the attention, the energy wasn't the kind he wanted. No admiration. No laughter. Just tension. He didn't like that, so instead of letting it go, because guys like Shaw never let things go, he made a decision. He stood. "Let's go find her," he said. Hensley's head snapped up. "Dude, what? No. Just stop. Eat your food." "Nah, Shaw said, cracking his knuckles. She wants to act tough. Let's see how tough she is when she's not walking away. Fortman swallowed hard, eyes shifting nervously. Shaw, come on, man, you already made your point. Shaw scoffed. No, I didn't. She thinks she can look at me like that and just leave. That's disrespect. Hensley felt a pit form in his stomach. He wasn't brave enough to stop Shaw, but he wasn't stupid enough to follow him either. Nope, he said firmly. I'm staying here. Fortman nodded quickly. Yes, same. Shaw glared at both of them, annoyed that his backup squad was suddenly full of cowards, but his ego didn't let him sit down. He took a step toward the exit, then another, tray abandoned, fists clenched, but before he could leave the room, Specialist Shaw, a calm, controlled voice called. It was Mercer. Shaw froze. He didn't turn around right away. That would mean respecting the rank. Instead, he casually glanced over his shoulder. What? He said. Mercer didn't react to the disrespect. He just watched him with the same cool steadiness Cross had shown earlier. You're about to make a mistake, Mercer said quietly. A big one? Shaw smirked, pretending the warning didn't land. What mistake? I just bumped into her. Mercer nodded once, and she walked away. Yeah, Shaw said, like a coward. Mercer's eyes sharpened. Or like someone who's been through more than you can imagine. Shaw blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Mercer didn't answer. He didn't have to, because every soldier in the room felt the same truth slide through the air like cold steel. Cross didn't walk away because she was scared. She walked away because she knew exactly what she was capable of and exactly what Shaw wasn't, and Shaw, still blind to the danger, took another step toward the door. The mess hall held its breath again. Because everyone knew something was coming.